Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going exploring something you do every single day, your daily routine. I'm so excited to dive into the vocabulary and grammar that we use to talk about our routines, like
Yeah.
how we structure our days and also maybe uncover some fun cultural quirks along the way.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how, those everyday words we use can actually reveal a lot about our lifestyles.
Absolutely, and I'm excited to learn more about different cultural norms.
And by the end, hopefully you'll be able to talk about your daily schedule with more confidence and maybe even gain a new perspective on how other cultures approach their day.
I love that. So to give everyone a quick overview, we've got some awesome source material packed with like all those essential verbs for describing morning routines, like wake up, brush your teeth, get dressed, all the things we do without even thinking.
Yeah, like on autopilot.
Exactly.
But even with these, simple actions, there are things to think about. Like, for instance, prepositions.
Oh, prepositions.
Yeah, these small words can totally change the meaning. Think about the difference between get out of bed and get in bed.
Wow, yeah, that's true. Just one little word changes the whole meaning.
Totally.
And our sources also give us some really handy phrases you can actually use in conversations about routines. Like, uh, for example, what time do you wake up?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It seems so basic, but it's such a natural way to, start talking about someone's morning.
Exactly. It opens the door to learning about, their habits, what they like, what they don't like. As we move into midday in the afternoon, then our focus shifts more to work or school, right?
Right.
So the vocabulary here revolves around activities like attend meetings or take a break,
Yeah.
which are pretty universal experiences.
Yeah, definitely. But even within those shared experiences, like there are those cultural
For
differences.
sure.
One of the sources pointed out how lunch breaks can be super structured in some cultures, like
Yeah.
a fixed time when everyone stops. But in other cultures, it's way more flexible. So
Hmm.
I'm really curious to hear more about how those work cultures can actually shape, someone's day.
Yeah, for sure. It's not just about the words. It's about the bigger context, like the culture they're embedded in. But let's shift gears for a sec and talk about the evening. Our sources really highlight that sense of winding down, connecting with family, or just relaxing solo. We see words like cook dinner, watch TV, and read a book.
It's almost like they're painting this picture of leisure time.
Right.
It's so interesting how the source material makes that distinction between the actual action of going home and that state of relaxing. I mean, physically getting home is one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but actually letting yourself unwind mentally, that's totally different.
Totally, yeah. Going home is just the first step, but relaxing, that means you've made the effort to, de-stress.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And just like with the morning routine section, we have some more example dialogue for the evening. So this one says, what do you usually do after dinner? Prompting you to think about your own activities
Yeah.
and use what we're learning to describe them.
Yeah, it's encouraging you to actively use the language, which is, how we learn. Now, as we move into the nighttime routine, that final winding down, our sources focus on all those words and phrases we use when getting ready for sleep. We see familiar ones like brush your teeth again, along with set an alarm, go to bed, and fall asleep.
Now it seems to me like, fall asleep is more natural when we're talking about that actual process of drifting off.
Yeah,
Whereas go to bed is more about, the intention.
exactly. It's about picking the most natural way to say it, depending on what you mean. Our sources want you to really think about your nighttime routine and practice describing it using all these words. The more you use them, the better you'll get.
Okay, so we've covered morning, midday, evening, and nighttime routines. That's a whole day in
Our
vocabulary.
whole day.
But what I'm really excited about is the cultural insights. One source mentioned how dinner time can be totally different in different places. Like they specifically talked about Spain, where people tend to eat much later than we do here.
Yeah. Late.
Why is that? I want to know more about that.
It's such a great example of how even something simple like when you eat dinner can show us deeper cultural values. In Spain, eating later is often connected to that tradition of siesta, that midday break,
Oh, yeah.
for rest and relaxation.
It all makes sense now. It's not just about when you eat, but like the whole rhythm of your day.
The whole rhythm, exactly. And as we'll see later on, getting these little cultural differences can actually make a big difference in how we communicate with people from other backgrounds.
It's so true. All right, that was a great overview of the vocab and a taste of the cultural stuff to come. Before we jump into part two, take a moment to think about your own routine and how it compares to what we talked about. We'll be back soon with more.
Welcome back. I'm so ready to get into these cultural bits and maybe find some more interesting vocabulary.
Yeah, me too. Actually, while I was looking through everything, I noticed some like practice exercises, and I thought it might be fun to actually try them out.
I totally agree. Putting things into practice, I mean, that's how you learn.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's one thing to hear about these words, but using them like really helps.
totally.
So what kind of exercises were you thinking about?
Well, there's this like fill in the blanks one. I thought maybe we could try that together. It'll be a good way to see if we get it.
I love it. Let's do it. Ready for the first one?
Hit me.
All right. I blank up at 6 a.m. What do you think goes in there?
Okay. Well, thinking back to our talk about morning routines, I think it's wake. So I wake up at 6 a.m. Pretty classic.
Nailed it. Okay, next one. I blank to work at 8 a.m. What do you think?
This one's about getting to work. I'd say commute. I commute to work at 8 a.m.
Yes,
Perfect. Commute. Such a, useful word.
totally.
Okay, last one. This one's a little trickier. I blank some emails before bed.
Okay, so this is before sleep.
Yeah.
Since it's about emails, I'm going to say check. I check some emails before bed. I know a lot of people do that.
Yeah, guilty as charged. You got them all right. See, it's a fun way to, really see if we understand.
Yeah, and how these words can fit into different sentences.
Exactly. Speaking of getting creative, one of the sources suggests describing your whole routine, like from start to finish, using as much vocabulary as possible.
I love that. It makes it more personal.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to get like specific. Maybe you have a special morning thing you do.
Yeah. The more detailed, the better. You'll remember it more easily.
For sure.
Speaking of individuality, I wanted to go back to something that kept coming up, the idea of being aware of different cultures. Oh, yeah, that's a really important part of communication. What was it that stuck out to you?
Well, all the sources talk about how daily routines can be super different in different cultures. It's not just what you do, but like when you do it, why you do it.
Totally. And that's where things get really fascinating, like that dinner time thing in Spain, remember?
Oh, yeah.
Eating late is often connected to, their siesta tradition and a more relaxed work schedule.
Exactly. And one of the sources even talked about how this could be tricky for travelers who don't know about it. Like imagine showing up for dinner at 6 p.m. and everyone's still napping.
Oh, that would be awkward. But it just shows how important it is to be aware of these things, even for something as simple as a daily routine.
So how can we be more aware of cultural differences, especially when it comes to these everyday routines?
The best way, honestly, is just to ask.
Oh, okay.
Don't be shy to talk to people from different cultures about their daily lives. Ask about their typical day, what they do, how they relax.
I love that. So it's not about assuming things. It's about being curious and learning from other people.
Exactly. And remember, it goes both ways. You're learning about them, but you're also sharing about your own culture, which can lead to some pretty amazing conversations.
I'm already thinking of questions to ask my friends from other countries. Like, when do they wake up? What do they eat? How do they unwind?
That's the spirit. It's these little details that help us really connect with others.
This has been awesome. So much good vocabulary, fun exercises, and really interesting insights.
I agree. And before we wrap up this part, I have a question for our listener. Think about all the routines we've discussed, yours and others. What do they tell us about what we value, what's important to us, and how we choose to spend our time?
That's a great question. It really makes you think about, like, the bigger picture, how those everyday things can actually tell us so much about who we are. We'll be back soon with the last part of our deep dive to wrap up all these amazing insights. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into daily routines. So are we ready to bring it all together and really see what we can take away from all this?
Definitely. Let's do it.
Yeah.
How can we use this to better understand, everyday English in different cultures?
I think it's awesome how we started with those basic verbs like, wake up and brush your teeth, but then we went deeper into phrases like commute to work or wind down.
Right. We even talked about how those little prepositions like in get out of bed versus get in bed
Yeah,
can completely change what you mean. They're small, but they make a big difference.
totally. And it's amazing how much we can say with just a few words, right?
Yeah.
And those practice exercises really showed us how important it is to actively use these words if we want to remember them.
Exactly. One of the most important things I think our listeners can take away from this is to just talk about their routines. It doesn't matter who you're talking to, a friend, a coworker, or even someone you just met. Describing your day is a great way to practice.
It's such a natural way to start a conversation.
Yeah, and it can be as simple or as complex as you want. You can start with the basics, like I wake up at 7, have breakfast, and then go to work. And as you get more comfortable, you can add more details.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to, mess up. Making mistakes is part of learning, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The more you use the words, the more natural they'll feel.
Definitely.
And like we talked about, we can't forget about being aware of other cultures.
Yeah.
Even something as simple as a daily schedule can be different depending on where you are.
Right. Remember our example about dinner time in Spain? It just goes to show that being curious and open-minded can really help us understand each other better.
It's not just about the words anymore. It's about connecting with people and seeing the world from their perspective.
Ex-
I'm so glad we talked about that. Before we wrap up, I think it would be great to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Yeah, a little challenge. Okay, so think back to all the routines we talked about today, both yours and those of people from different cultures. What do these routines tell you about what we value, what we prioritize, and how we spend our time?
Wow, that's deep. It really makes you think about the bigger picture behind all those everyday things we do.
It's a window into who we are and what we find important.
Well said. Well, it's time to wrap up our deep dive into daily routines. I feel like we covered so much, from basic vocabulary to really interesting cultural insights.
Absolutely. And I hope you've all learned some new words and gained a new appreciation for the different ways people live their lives around the world.
It was a pleasure exploring all of this with you and with our listeners. And remember, the journey of language learning never really ends. Keep practicing, stay curious, and have fun with it.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time.